Hello and welcome to the Move Your Business Forward podcast. These talks are hosted by Rob Boll, founder of Evoke Management and CEO of International Leaders UK. We'll be talking with experts from both these companies about issues that affect SME companies today.
Welcome to this episode of the Move Your Business Forward podcast. Today I'm joined by Robert Postlethwaite. Robert founded and runs law firm Postlethwaite, and their specialism and Robert's specialism is being one of the UK's leading experts on employee ownership and share schemes, mainly for SMEs. So Robert, thanks very much for joining me today. It's great to have you have a conversation with us. So thanks for joining.
Thank you very much for having me.
You're welcome. So I guess we'll get straight into it. I mean, the main reason for having a conversation with you, Robert, is all the work that you've done from a legal perspective, helping companies understand employee ownership and navigate through the whole process of becoming employee owned, what route to go down is really what we're talking about today. So yeah, first of all, I guess the trend in employee ownership. I mean, we're sat here and we've got a sunny day in October 23, which is causing your screen issues. I think the sun's just changed. It was okay just now. So yeah, October 23. What do you see being the big trends in employee ownership for SMEs right now? What's the kind of the word on the street, as it were, from what's happening?
Well, that's an interesting question, because it really feels as if not only has it kind of come speeding into the mainstream within the last couple of years, but kind of we find almost anybody we talk to, both other advisors and companies themselves, actually now know what an employee ownership trust is. Whereas until fairly recently, it was very much a minority sport. And if you mention the phrase employee ownership trust or EOT in a conversation, as I was very wont to do, then you would get a lot of blank looks. And of course, I was always then very happy to explain what an EOT was. I don't so much have to do that now. People in business much more seem to have come across the idea and are also interested in having a conversation about it. So yeah, that's the first big thing, is much greater recognition. That is translating into more companies deciding to go down this route, or certainly more companies deciding to look at it when they're thinking about ownership succession. Some will decide on an employee ownership trust. Some will feel it's not for them for various different reasons. But yeah, what's also happening is people are looking at it, whereas previously they probably wouldn't even known about it as a possibility.
And with that, because I often talk to companies who are looking at succession and exit options, and sometimes it's a new thing to them, and immediately they can go and Google and find out a bit more, and there's a lot more written about it now. But why do you think more people are aware of it now than there ever have been over the last couple of years?
I think it's a variety of reasons. Let's start with some of the other companies that have done it are, you might say, household names. So that aids recognition. So not everyone's heard of Richer Sounds or Riverford Organics, for example, but they are two companies as examples that are relatively well known. So often when I mention the phrase employee ownership trust, people will say, "Oh, you mean like Richer Sounds, for example?"
Yeah.
So that helps with recognition. Also, I think business culture has become much more comfortable with employee ownership. If you want to go back a generation or two, then the way businesses were managed was much more towards, I don't want to overstate this, but it often was much more towards the kind of command and control approach, where the idea of getting your employees engaged in what was happening in the business wasn't it wasn't really seen as a worthwhile or even possible objective.
Yep.
Whereas now it's not just worthwhile and possible, but in many cases it's essential.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a good cultural fit. There's recognition, and also company owners, when they're thinking about succession, they will often go and talk to their kind of main trusted advisor. That might be their accountant, or it might be an independent financial advisor. They also know a lot more about EOTs than they used to.
Yes.
So that will really help it come onto the agenda.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. Thank you, Robert. And I guess one of the things you mentioned earlier on is, people often get in touch and want to have a conversation about it. Well, that's the kind of natural first step. And I think, as you alluded to, some people will find this is a great fit for them, and the conversation will push them even more into that direction. Others will think, do you know what, this probably isn't for us, given other objectives we have, either as the founders or the majority shareholders. And therefore, actually, it's probably not the right thing for them. And I think this is a really big decision, isn't it? Because it's pretty unlikely an employee-owned trust is going to get unwound if someone goes down that route. It could be possible, but it's probably not the right way to go if that's the case. And I'm not proposing in this to get into all the discussions around that, but I think EOT is a choice that ticks a number of boxes for a number of companies and the founders, based on the succession options and also what people want to achieve, from one being tax efficient way to take money out of the business, but also leaving a legacy and feeling like you're looking over your team, looking after your team and the staff. And I guess what'll be interesting here is, from your time of doing this, where have you seen people make good decisions and it go well, and then maybe the opposite where it's gone wrong as well? Have you got some good stories on both sides of that?
Well, yeah, I think so. So let's start off with the good. And I would say, as a kind of general point, really, the companies that tend to do it best are the ones that haven't rushed it, and have taken the time to think about what the best way is of structuring employee ownership in their company that's going to work on a long-term basis. So we always say, although you can do it fairly quickly, don't rush it. Much better to just slow the pace down a little bit and plan carefully. Be patient. Some business owners can be, very keen to. They've had this idea of an employee ownership trust. They're kind of passionate about making it happen. They think it's the best idea they've ever come across for their business. I'm exaggerating slightly here, but you get the idea. And they want to do it by the end of the month. Whereas we would say, slow down a bit. There's a lot to think about here, and the more careful you are, without overdoing it, the better the structure you will have, with the best prospect of longevity. And also, make sure your leadership team are on board. So shouldn't really be something you do to your employees. Better, if you possibly can, that it's something you do with your employees. So if you're able to do so, it's good to involve your employees or a representative group of your employees in some of the planning. So that's the kind of the ideal approach.
On that one, Robert, I think is an interesting thing I end up talking to business owners and founders about is when they're looking at options, which could be trade sale, could be potentially management buyout, or employee ownership, amongst other things. There is that moment where you have to talk to your employees or to your senior team. And it's almost like, how much info do you want to give away? Because you might end up taking that option off the table because something else comes along. And I think that phase can be quite challenging, because often it's quite an emotional conversation and series of questions to grapple with as a business owner. And when you start bringing in other people that might go, oh, that sounds great for us, and are keen to do it, it's then difficult to take that option back off the table.
It is. That's a very fair point. what I would say is, if you are going to involve your kind of wider employees, then perhaps it's best only to do so when you're pretty confident there aren't going to be any showstoppers.
Yep.
So confident that if you're interested in claiming the tax reliefs, that they are definitely going to be available. Confident that the valuation of your company is going to deliver to you the purchase price that you want it to, and that the money is going to be available to pay that purchase price. Yep. Things like that are on the critical path, if you like. You might want to make sure that they're ticked off before you actually start having a conversation with your team about, well, what's it actually going to look like.
Yeah, no, great. No, I think that's really useful, Robert, for sure. So we've only touched on a couple of the good bits there, but on the other side, where have you seen it?
What can go wrong? Well, let's be realistic. There are situations where things may not go absolutely according to plan. We've worked with a pretty large number of companies that have gone down this route, and it would be miraculous if they'd all had the totally perfect employee ownership experience. So let me talk about one or two examples of things that have not gone quite so well, and these may well sound familiar to anyone else who's been through an employee ownership transition. So the first thing is, you have a retiring owner who, as well as stepping down from the ownership, is also stepping down from a leadership role in the company, or maybe better put, is meant to be stepping down from a leadership role in the company, puts in place a new leadership team, and then carries on trying to play a leadership role. And which an unwillingness to let go. I have seen one company which was a fairly extreme example, where the founder did actually step back for a couple of years and went off and did something else, and then he got bored with the something else that he went off to do, and he kind of finished it as well. So he was thinking, well, what am I going to do now? Oh, I know, I'll come back in and become a much more active director of the company again. And it caused absolute mayhem, because the new leadership team were doing a perfectly good job, and he was coming along and questioning lots of their decisions. And ultimately, fairly radical steps had to be taken. And he had to be made to step down as a director, which is always a situation you preferably would avoid. I think it's essential that any founder who is selling to an employee ownership trust is willing to let go and has other things to do in life beyond carrying on working in the company.
But I think that's all part of the proper succession planning, isn't it? And I always ask people, so when you do this, what are you going to do next? And even if you have a trade sale and walk away completely, or if there's a bit of an earnout, you've still got to plan what you do next. And it could be go and start something else. But I think particularly with this, where you're still involved or can be involved and have got more control as to how involved or not involved, you've got to really be clear as to what that looks like and stick to it as well. And there will be moments where you might be called back in because actually the business needs you and it's not quite ready, but you've got to let people step up into their new leadership roles and carry the business on as part of that plan. So I think that's a really interesting
you're right about that. There could be situations where a former owner does have to step back in. But I would say that's to be avoided if at all possible.
And I think one of the things that comes up with that is often people thinking they're going to lose control too quickly. And as you're fully aware, the structure of these things should not really allow that to happen. If someone is actually selling the business to the employee-owned trust, potentially still involved in the day-to-day, but taking a step back, but also involved on the independent trustee board as well. You've got sorry, on the board for the representing the employees. There's enough aspects of control that you should, with the proper legal setup, you shouldn't be worried about losing control completely, other than when it gets to an extreme, and that would be the same for any business anyway, for any scenario.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, sometimes a bit of coaching can be useful. Just to sort of help with that process. So that's one. Would you like another?
Yeah, let's go with one more.
So for employee ownership to be successful, this is going to sound like a really obvious point, but it's often useful to look at. The absolute kind of key factor is, are the employees engaged as owners in the business? So when I say as owners, that's obviously through the trust, but indirectly they are owners. For the company to succeed under employee ownership, then it's absolutely critical that they do feel like owners. So what does that mean? They know what's going on, not in kind of excruciating detail, and lots of things will be confidential in terms of what's happening in the business, but the big picture is, how's the business performing, and what, are we on target for our profit? If not, why not? And that's information that employees should have. They should be able to understand, so it should be presented to them in an accessible way, and they should be given a voice as well, so that in all respects they are acting as owners. If that doesn't happen, so no investment is made of time or resources to encourage employees to feel like owners, then realistically it's much less likely it's going to succeed.
And the ways to do that, as you've suggested, is getting some of the senior team, and then maybe a small group that kind of represents the drive into that as a starting point.
Good start.
What are the I think one of the things that I've seen in a number of employee-owned companies is you get to a point where obviously the process is kicked off. The pre kind of planning has been done. You then come into a situation where there's a bit of communication about it, and then there's normally some kind of announcement. There's excitement about the whole thing, and then there's a period of time when nothing really changes because there's still things happening. The owners haven't necessarily been paid out through that process or that period of time, and some of the employees can then start to get disengaged or forget about it, or think, well, this isn't going to help us or benefit us for a long time. Have you got any tips for anyone that's either in that position or how to avoid getting in that position? Because I think that's where you can lose the interest.
Yes, I have. I agree with everything you've said, and the jam tomorrow message is not a useful one at all. So one thing that we tend to suggest companies do is an employee-owned company, if it's owned by an employee-owned trust, can pay its employees an income tax-free bonus. So we always suggest they consider starting that as early as possible. So, I mean, you could even pay one a week after the EOT has acquired control of the company. That's allowed. Doesn't necessarily need to be a lot of money, but it's an immediate, very tangible way of saying, look, we're doing things differently now. We're starting to share profit more widely. If we do that, it's income tax free. Here's the first payment. And then keep on doing that on a regular basis, whether it's annually or 6 monthly. That's one thing. It's not enough on its own, but it's one apparently small thing that can just start to make it real.
No, excellent. Well, thank you for that. That's a good share, and I think a useful thing to have. There's clearly a lot more we could talk about in this, and we're just touching on a few things. And I purposely haven't got into the detail of what an EOT is, or the difference between hybrid and one-way situation. But all of that is available. And I'll attach a couple of links to this podcast for people to look into that. But I think the most important thing is get the right advisors around you to talk through this process. Would you agree? Talking to the right people and also talking to the employee ownership community, which is very open and transparent around sharing things. Anything else you would advise anyone to do?
The community is very sharing, open, willing to share their positive experiences as well as things that they might do differently if they have the chance again. No one ever gets it 100% right. So yeah, I would definitely recommend both of those things as part of EOT exploration.
Yeah, perfect. And just one other thing to touch on, Robert, because you're in a fairly unique position, not the only law firm that's gone down this, but there aren't many law firms as part of their succession plan have actually solved what can often be a retiring partner issue by going employee owned. Would you recommend that for any other lawyers to go down that route, given your experience and knowing you're an expert in this field?
Well, for a firm that's considering succession, I would definitely recommend looking at it. Yes, we wouldn't say it's right for absolutely every law firm in the land, but we do think it has a number of positives which might be attractive to a significant number of law firms that are looking at succession. And I suppose the key point here is that we think that a successful law firm these days is about more than just the talent of the supreme lawyers in the practice. There are many other people working in a successful legal practice whose contribution is vital. So an ownership structure which reflects that will often have something very strongly to recommend it.
Yeah, no, perfect. And I guess you're living and breathing this, having advised many companies, but you've gone through it yourselves as well. And
we're doing it ourselves now.
Learned from that as well, for sure.
We've learned a lot from doing it in our own practice, definitely.
Yeah. We not long left for this, but one final thing, I guess, Robert. Anyone listening to this considering an EOT or some kind of employee share scheme incentive of some kind, what would be your one top tip to do if they were going to do anything?
Think about what it is you want to achieve from it. What in your business do you want this new form of ownership to deliver? And that will have a very strong impact on what you do. So yes, it might not necessarily be an employee ownership trust, but yeah, that's always going to be the starting point. Excellent.
Look, thanks, Robert. I've enjoyed talking to you today, and I'm sure we could probably do a number of more of these and share some more learnings and stuff. But I really appreciate you joining today and giving people a bit of a flavour of the things to expect and look out for. So thank you for joining.
Thank you, Rob. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like more information about the topics discussed in this podcast, then you can find us on our website at moveyourbusinessforward.com.